It's game week, so I have a special set of guests that are joining me on the show, and we're going to talk about Oklahoma versus Tulsa. And for you fans, we're going to talk about what you need to know about Tulsa, what to prepare for, what to keep your eyes on as the Sooners travel up to Tulsa, Oklahoma to play the Golden Hurricane. So I'm pretty excited to bring these guests on, and make sure you guys enjoy. Also, go find them on any podcast platform, wherever podcasts are downloaded, listen to. And while you're here, like, subscribe, and all of that jazz. Let's get started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some special guests here on the channel. We're going to talk Oklahoma versus the University of Tulsa, the Golden Hurricanes, my home city, my old stopping grounds. I'm pretty excited to see the Sooners make that trip, but we've got Ryan as well as Matt from the Golden Hurricast, which I love that name, by the way. Gentlemen, let the people know who you are and where they can find you. We'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah. So Matt from Tulsa, well, not from Tulsa, from St. Louis, went to TU, been, now Tulsa is my stomping grounds. I'm pretty much only found on the Golden Hurricast Twitter. That's the only thing that I'm doing. So don't try and find me anywhere else, please.
He's anonymous. Ryan.
Yeah. Name's Ryan Token. I'm also originally from St. Louis, Missouri. Me and Matt lived pretty close together growing up, but didn't know each other. Got to know each other at TU when we both came to school there. Stuck around in Tulsa for several years after that. Now I'm in Denver. Been here for a year and a half or so now and loving it. But yeah, on Twitter, mostly doing stuff on the Hurricast. I do have my own Twitter, _ Ryan Token, but all the sports stuff is related to the Hurricast. So if you want to follow us there, we are at Golden Hurricast on Twitter. /X.
Awesome. And like I said, they have a podcast, so you can listen to them wherever podcasts are downloaded and listen to. And so we're going to dive into the game. We've got Oklahoma. We've got Tulsa. Now, the big understanding here is we need to know our opponent. And the biggest thing here to me, and the first question I have for you gentlemen, Kevin Wilson comes in as the new head coach there at Tulsa. What's the hype like? How do the fans feel about Kevin coming in, starting a whole new era of Tulsa ball? Because Tulsa is known for having some really good teams, scrappy teams, some that do compete. I mean, we've seen award-winning linebackers and everything there. So talk to us about Kevin Wilson and that new era and what it looks like there at Tulsa.
Yeah, it's been a journey so far since he got hired. The hiring process was interesting for Kevin Wilson. It was, I don't know, I think the initial reaction from fans was unexpected. He was not a name that was really being floated while the coaching search was going on. But since then, the hype is just, as happens after you hire the guy, the hype kind of goes up and up and up as you get closer to the season. The reason primarily for that, maybe a little bit of trepidation around that hire was at his time at OU, or at Indiana. I mean, he was that coach there for several years, 6 or 7. And they, the record in Indiana doesn't look very good, right? They're in the Big Ten. They're in the same division as Ohio State, and it's a hell of a division over there. The record itself is not very good, but if you look at his trend over the time in Indiana, it is stellar. Like, he took over the first year; they were last in the Big Ten. Everything, he took over that program when they were in that spot. You look at him at the end of his time there; they were putting up points on everybody. They went to back-to-back bowl games in Indiana for the first time since 1999. Lots of good stuff came out of his tenure there. And he was not fired for football performance, and this is where the trepidation comes from. He was fired primarily because he was a little rough on players. He played them when they were asking to be kept out because of injuries, or that's the story. And so he went a little hard on it, and that didn't rub the AD the right way, which is understandable. So they separated off. He goes to Ohio State, runs that offense for several years, and obviously has been rolling that thing at a high level. And then Oklahoma fans probably know he was at OU for quite a while. I think it was 2002 to 2011, and really had things clicking at OU. So he's a good ball coach. And he knows the area well. When the name was hired, people were pretty excited about him, and it's just gotten more exciting since then. So the general trend around him is very good. One of the biggest complaints about the previous regime under Phil Montgomery was like the discipline on this team was not there. We were bottom of the country in penalties almost every year under him, and that led to a lot of other things. We got into a lot of fights on the field, and things like that. He was very casual with the players, and the players loved it. Don't get me wrong; like the players totally loved that dude. but I don't think there was as much, military style, button down the hashes to get down to business under Montgomery. So that's already been very evident change under Kevin Wilson, and a very welcome change. But yeah, so far it's been good, and I think there's a lot of optimism for him.
I like to hear that. And you're right. Offensively, Wilson is infamous for his offenses getting better and better as he gets himself ingrained into the program. Like you said, Indiana, that's a tough job. If you think about it, it's in the Big Ten. It's a program that I'm going to say historically to me is not very good. Like I'm going to say from 2004 and 23 years is probably far enough. Or if I can go back even into the 80s, when I was a child, we didn't really talk about Indiana on the football field. We talked about them on the basketball court. And so it's not a program that just immediately attracts a lot of talent. And, he was working with what he could. And like you said, he was a little tough. He was known for being tough. And so with that resignation, it kind of tainted him a little bit leaving there, but going to Ohio State, redeeming himself, showing that he can make it happen and take care of players properly. He killed it there. They were really good at Indiana. And so very interested in him coming back. Brent Venables spoke very highly of him in the most recent press conference because, they used to kind of battle it out. Defensive coordinator, offensive coordinators, they were always trying to work each other out or whatnot. And so as far as Kevin's thoughts on this game coming up, I haven't got a chance to really look for and see any of his pressers. Has he said anything about playing against Oklahoma and how that feels to him?
Yeah, he has. And you mentioned, he was at Venables at OU for the same time for 9 years, right? So they shared a lot of time together. And you mentioned, battling back and forth, offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator and their squads out there. One of the stories he told in his radio show on Monday was the defense at OU during that time was so good. And the offense was good too, right? They were not like a lackluster offense, but they had real trouble moving the ball against that defense in practice. So much so that they would have to, sometimes they wouldn't make it down the full field over the course of an entire practice. They'd have to cut the practice short, set the ball up at 15 manually, just so they could run some of their red zone sets, And so, he had some fun stories about his time there. And I think he didn't talk too much about Venables, at least not that I heard. Mostly he made, the comments you'd expect. He really enjoyed his time there. He has an absolute ton of respect for Brent Venables, thinks he's one of the best in the business, and really looks up to him and that staff. So I think there's a lot of good camaraderie that came out of that time there. But in terms of what he's thinking about the game this season, coming up on Saturday, he didn't make any super specific comments. Obviously, it's going to be a challenging game. I think it opened up as 23-point underdogs for Tulsa and since moved to 28.
Okay.
It's moving the wrong direction. We've also got we can maybe talk about this later too, but we've got a quarterback situation going on in terms of injuries. We're down to our third stringer right now and might be second stringer by the time we get to Saturday. But it doesn't sound like it's going to be the number one guy in Braylon Braxton. So, either way, there's things you can take from a game, even if it's your third stringer all game, but that's going to make it more challenging for sure.
No, that's true. And that's a good point you made mention of how good the defenses were back with Venables in the first regime, his first stint with Oklahoma, and in comparison to the offense, because that 2018 was ridiculous. It had the most points scored at the time. Now it's the third overall in NCAA history, and 16 points for the entire season, which is absurd. I mean, Sam Bradford threw for 50 touchdowns, 4,700 yards. I mean, yeah, that's an insane offense, and for you to say the defense was that good that they had to manually move up the field, that tells you a lot about what Brent Venables was doing. And also, Sooner fans should be excited and hopeful that we can actually return to that era of football, because technically that's really what you see at Georgia right now, as well as you saw it at Clemson, and you see it at Bama's or whatnot, and that's where we would like to go. And so I'm ready to see. So as far as the excitement goes, you talked about the quarterback situation. Let's dive into that real quick, and then we'll talk about Kevin Wilson's offense and how that's going to work with the way that the team plays. You're dealing with injuries, like you mentioned, you're down to the third string. What does that situation look like, and how? Who's the quarterback we should know about today?
Yeah. So, first game, Arkansas Pine Bluff, FCS. We're coming in. Braylon Braxton, he kind of lit it up at the end of last year. Davis Brin got hurt. Davis Brin ended up transferring after Kevin Wilson came in. Braxton entered the transfer portal, but Kevin Wilson convinced him to come back. So there's a lot of excitement. 2 drives in, and he's got an ankle injury, and he has not been on the field since, and he's still, as of right now, recovering.
And walking
In comes freshman redshirt Cardell Williams, who just, a little shaky maybe on his first drive, and then lights it up and had one of the most efficient games for a freshman quarterback in Tulsa history, at least. He started 13 for 13, ended up 13 for 14 on the day. Go to Washington. He has a pretty good first drive, marches down the field, puts up, we get a field goal, not too bad for your first drive at, Washington as a freshman. Then he bruises his hand. He's out. So now we're on to Roman Fuller, who is another, just hasn't played that much. He looked all right against Washington. Obviously, we weren't really favored, and, putting up 10 points, I think, was pretty impressive based on the situations we were dealing with. So as it stands right now, I kind of think Cardell Williams will be back by the game on Saturday. I don't think Braylon Braxton will be. And so Cardell Williams, can be an electric quarterback. He is kind of a similar quarterback to Braylon Braxton. They're both going to be moving around, using their feet a lot to try and find those open, passing lanes. And so, knock on wood, if he's back, he's kind of the guy that we're going to, put a lot of hope and faith into, getting something moving this Saturday.
Okay. I can totally see that. And I mean, he coming out of Houston, and he had some pretty solid offers on his list. I'm surprised University of Houston didn't break their neck to try to keep him there, but, Tulsa won out his services. And as a freshman coming out there, like you mentioned, he started off pretty well. And then, unfortunately, the injury at Washington. It's always the worst, right? Travel up to Seattle, play against Washington, and then all of a sudden your starting quarterback goes down. Dang.
Yep, for sure.
You're definitely hoping for more. And so Roman Fuller, he's been at Tulsa this entire time, though, right? He's been with the last 3 years.
Yep, he's a redshirt junior.
Okay. And so far, it looks like he's most likely going to be the starter unless Cardell's injury, his hand is most likely healed, correct?
Yeah, based on Kevin Wilson's presser yesterday on Tuesday, it kind of sounded like Williams might be ready, but one thing that I think we're kind of realizing with Kevin Wilson is, the depth chart, the injury report, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, whether or not it's actually true. Because Braylon Braxton still listed as the starting quarterback for this week, even though we're not really expecting him. So I right now would put money on Cardell Williams being the starter. Okay.
Perfect. And that running back room, I mean, talk to me. Talk about these backs there at TU.
Yeah, man. It's been interesting coming in because our offensive coordinator is Steve Spurrier Jr., right? And he came from Mississippi State under Mike Leach, and you think the air raid and all of that. And that has not been the case. And he made that pretty clear when we hired him over here, and Kevin Wilson made that clear as well. We were not going to be a pure air raid team because half of our running backs and tight ends wanted to transfer away right away because they thought they weren't going to be playing. And it was just going to be 5 out, wideouts. So not the case. It's been very balanced in terms of yardage, at least. We've actually run the ball far more than we have passed it. I think that you can probably attribute a lot of that to we've been playing a third string quarterback a lot of the times. So we're handing it off a lot. But yeah, those backs, it's pretty much a trio, by committee trio style thing. There's 3 main guys you should know about as an OU fan. Jordan Ford. He's been, if you're going to name someone kind of the lead dog of that trio, he's been the main one. He's been getting the most carries, getting the most work. After him, Bill Jackson, Anthony Watkins. The interesting thing is Anthony Watkins was on the roster last year and was our number 1 guy, easily. He's arguably the most explosive of those backs. He's got the most experience of those backs. But he's sitting there at number 3 or number 4 on the depth chart right now. So I don't really know what's going on with Watkins. He's still very talented. He's explosive. But he's being right now beat out by Jordan Ford and Bill Jackson. And of those 3 guys, Bill Jackson actually is averaging the most yards per carry at 6.4. So it's a solid room. I wouldn't say they're world beaters or anything like that. If Anthony Watkins was the number 1 guy and putting up the numbers he was last year, I would be really hyped on Anthony Watkins right now. But with where he's at on the depth chart, he's just not as much of a factor as he was last year so far. So you never know. I wouldn't be surprised if halfway through the season he's the number 1 guy again. Maybe he's just working through something with the new staff. Who knows? But right now he's sitting there at number 3.
Okay. Let's look at that defense. Before we really dive into the Kevin Wilson offense. It's interesting you made mention of that. Steve Spurrier Jr. coming over underneath Coach Mike Leach, rest in peace. And you're not doing the air raid. So I know some players were, like you said, players terrified thinking about transferring because it makes sense. Once you get into an air raid system, even though the interesting thing I've learned about a lot of these air raid coaches is even though they throw the ball like 80 times in the game, they still run the ball like 40 times.
Yeah.
It's just nonstop. So everybody's going to get touches. You're just going to be tired whenever you're playing for that. You got to be in good shape if you want to be prepared to manage that. But defense-wise, what's on that defensive line? Talk to me about that. Who's some players that we need to keep our eyes on as Sooner fans?
You want to take this, Matt, or you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do two big names that kind of come to mind are Owen Ostrowski. Ostrowski, is a Tulsa legend. His dad played for TU back in the 90s. And he has been just every year. This is, year 3 for him. And every year he's just getting better, and he has looked electric on, I guess the left side. And then transfer from Oklahoma State, Ben Kapinski. We didn't see a lot from him in the Washington game, but in the first game of this season, him and Ostrowski were just like thunder and lightning, on that line.
Mm-hmm.
And Kapinski, he's wearing number 0. And to Kevin Wilson, number 0 kind of goes to the player that had the best training camp. Originally, they were supposed to go to Kendarren Ray, but Kendarren Ray has been rocking number 1 for his entire career at TU, so he passed on it. So Ben Kapinski technically had the second best training camp amongst all players. But those two guys kind of on the line are the ones that I'm the most excited about.
Ryan, you got anybody else you want to add to that list?
Yeah, I think Matt hit most of the guys. You mentioned Kendarren Ray. We'll touch on him a little bit more. He's kind of the leader of that defense, like probably 6th-year senior at this point. Been there forever. Big physical safety, long guy, long arms, really athletic, can get after you, and is not afraid to get in there and stop the run either. He's all over the field. You'll see him plenty on Saturday. I hope I hope we see him plenty on Saturday. He's a good player. To kind of talk about maybe the weaknesses of the defense real quick. Probably the weakest position group on that side of the ball is the corners. There was a lot of unknowns about them coming into the season. There's still a lot of unknowns, unfortunately. Like the starters have been the same 2 guys both games. Have been another Oklahoma State transfer in DeMarco Jones, and then a longtime Tulsa guy, Tyree Carlisle. They've been just a little bit out of position here and there. We've been rotating in a lot of guys too because it's been a more or less unknown position group. So outside of those 2, it's been an Arkansas transfer in Kewan Parker. Another Oklahoma State. We got so many Oklahoma State transfers, man. But there's another one.
I noticed that.
Yeah, another one in Kine Williams. Those are kind of your main rotation guys. Nunu Campbell also coming in at corner. None of them have jumped off the page yet as like the guy who's going to lock you down, which is kind of a change. Aside from last season, the past many years on the Tulsa defense, the corners have been awesome. Like we've sent many to the NFL. They've been big, long guys, really, really solid on that side of the ball. And it is right now it's kind of flipped, unfortunately. So the corners are a weak spot. Scares me because I know OU's got heck of an offense coming up with some big time wide receivers. We'll see how that goes. But aside from them, like the defense is relatively mature, experienced, pretty solid. But those corners, that's kind of the weak spot.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I'm glad that you were able to point out what's there. So with the defensive coordinator, Chris, was it Polizzi?
Polizzi.
Yes, said it right the
Nailed.
First time. First try. Something I rarely do. Well, Coach Polizzi, what type of defense does he typically run? I mean, I know you may mention the corner seem like that's kind of a weak spot. I'm assuming that there's some sort of assistance that's there to help and watch for them. What kind of defense are we going to be looking at?
Yeah, it's been almost entirely a 4-2-5 so far, which is a little bit of a shift from what we had before under Joe Gillespie. Yeah, wow, blanked right there. But anyway, Polizzi, so he's running a 4-2-5 for the most part. We do flip into 3-3-5 very rarely. It's almost always a 4-2-5. So you still got 5 DBs back there, trying to cover for each other, trying to prevent that big play. Something that happened against Washington, they've got arguably the second best offense in the country right now. And the strategy going into the game was, what can we do to prevent the big play, the deep ball? And we kind of succeeded at that. We dropped 8 in coverage almost the entire game. Like, it was we throw everything we've got at trying to prevent the big time throws, what that's going to leave open naturally is the short passes on the sides and the flats. And those were open all game. Washington had no problem taking them. Like, they weren't upset about this. And their one-on-one skill guys just beat us on the outsides over and over and over again. And that, it's just big chunk plays over time. And they found themselves in the end zone plenty. So we did not have any, I wouldn't say any, but we had very few, like, giving up huge plays, like 50-yard bombs that go for a score. And that didn't really happen. Washington also dropped some wide open passes, which was surprising. But we had a plan in mind to take that away. We did take it away, but we weren't able to cover up those flats and make tackles in space when we needed to. So that's generally how we've been tackling it. I wouldn't be too surprised if we did something similar against OU on Saturday, just because of how explosive that offense can be. I know that there were some people upset on Saturday against SMU with how that offense played, but I know there's a ton of talent on that side of the ball, and I think Tulsa's going to be under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, we've got a lot of fans that are really upset at the fact that we didn't go out there and score 73 points on SMU when, it's not realistic against a team that brings in a ton of Power 5 transfers. I think they got like 20-something transfers in. So, yeah, the expectation is we get back to not being so conservative and actually playing the game that everybody wants to see. But it's going to be a fun afternoon. I'm really excited about this game. I wish I could get back up to Tulsa. My son has a soccer tournament this weekend, and so I'm stuck in Oklahoma City the entire weekend. Yay! But I'll be watching because this game is over before this game kicks off, so I'll be on my couch definitely checking this game out. And so, outside of that, how do you all think that Tulsa's going to finish out the season? I know the schedule gets a little bit more favorable once we get past this this OU game. How do you guys feel the season is going to pan out for you?
Matt, go for it.
Yeah. So maybe not considering, if we get healthy at the quarterback position, feeling way more confident, after this game. I don't know if you'll find a realistic Tulsa fan who didn't think we were going to be 1-2 after this game, which is that, I guess, foreshadowing my prediction for Tulsa losing this game this weekend. But as far as the rest of the season, our schedule is pretty favorable in the American. We dodge some of the top teams like the Memphises, the UTSAs, and this past week did not inspire a lot of confidence in some of our opponents. You got like FAU lost to Ohio. You've got like Northern Illinois, who not in the American, but is our next game, lost to an FCS team. So all of a sudden it's, feeling a little better. I think when Kevin Wilson came in, the expectation amongst Tulsa fans was not that this was a rebuild. It was kind of like the foundation is there. And like the last year, we had a team that should have made a bowl and we didn't. And it was just kind of time to make the move, to move on from Philip Montgomery. And that's kind of the expectation, is like Tulsa fans expect to make a bowl this season. And that's kind of how I feel. Like, optimistically, we could go 8-4 if everything gets going as the season. Like, if the offense improves, as some of our younger guys step up and start being, stepping into, I don't know, not their potential, or Kevin Wilson kind of, you talked about it, his offenses get better as time goes on. And so that's kind of like, I think, what our ceiling is we could get 8 wins based on the level of competition that we're playing. But I could also see us at 6.
Yeah, not much to add there. I will tag on, though, that like nothing has changed to change where I think this Tulsa team is going to be yet. I still I had us at 7-5 as our our preseason prediction going in. Still think we can get there. Still think 8 is possible, given that the American seems to be kind of down so far in the season. The thing that gives me a little bit of pause is, and I know we were just playing Washington, like a very, very good offense, maybe one of the 2 best in the country. They just the defense didn't really stop them once. We turned them over twice. One was a bad overthrow by Michael Penix Jr. One was a strip, a fumble recovery. But in terms of like stopping them on third down and forcing a punt, they didn't punt one time the entire game. They had no problem moving the ball on this defense. And we were talking about it in our podcast yesterday, recording it. I'm like, is that more? There's two choices, right? Is it totally Washington just being awesome, or is it more of the case that our defense is maybe worse than we thought it was going to be? And it's obviously going to be somewhere in the middle there, but how much in the middle? How much does it skew toward one or the other? I'm a little bit concerned that the defense might be a lot worse than I was hoping. And we won't actually know this really until OU will be a good test, but they're very good, right? OU is also very good. I think we'll get a real feel for it against Northern Illinois the week after this game. But I don't know. That's the thing that gives me a little bit of pause on how this season might go. But I'm still generally optimistic that we will make a bowl game. I'd be very surprised if that didn't happen at this point. And we could maybe get to 7 or 8.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And when I look through the schedule or whatnot, I see the only 2 games that probably will really be concerning is SMU and Tulane. And I think both of those teams are actually a lot more solid. Well, Tulane's really good. We know that they're good. I'm surprised they didn't win that game against Ole Miss, to be absolutely honest. But at a certain point, that attrition kicked them in the butt, and they were
playing with their backup quarterback too.
Exactly.
They could have had it. And those 2 games are also on the road, which makes it tough.
Yeah, and that's what made them so tough to me. I saw that, I was like, oh, those are road games too.
Yeah, it's tough.
Driving to Dallas.
Home schedule for TU though is easy.
Yeah, it's very favorable. And I think going up to Northern Illinois, that'll be a good way for you guys to figure out exactly what it is. So, like you mentioned, the defense doesn't look very favorable. Northern Illinois, and you really shut them down. You're like, oh, okay, it's probably just them needing to know each other. New DC, things need to click. We saw the same thing last year at Oklahoma. That was the biggest thing with, bringing in Venables with all the changes. Only 3 people knew the scheme coming in, and everybody had to figure it out. And Venables is infamous for its complex scheme. So took a year to figure it out. Now it looks like they're clicking, they're faster, and they're getting it. So, but no, thank you guys for jumping on. Please let the people know where they can find you. And the next time you're going to record your episode, definitely going to check you out. So I'll pass it back to you all.
Sure. Yeah. Again, the podcast name is the Golden Hurricast. We're on every podcast player, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, whatever you listen on. Just search for the Golden Hurricast. You'll find us there. On Twitter, we are at Golden Hurricast, all one word. That's the only social media we've got rolling right now. Tried out the Instagram game for a while. Didn't really hit with us. So Twitter is where we're at if you want to find us. And also, if you're not on Twitter and you still want to follow along, we've got a website, thegoldenhurricast.com. Check that out. That's where we kind of put all of our stuff.
Awesome. Gents, thank you again for pulling up. And y'all, I'll have the link to the latest podcast in the description below. So make sure y'all check it out. And we'll see you all Saturday.
Perfect. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Jay.
Awesome. Thank y'all for pulling up. Hop in the comments. Let your boy know what's your thoughts. How you feeling about this game coming up this weekend? What do you want to see out of the Sooners? We're going to have a whole bunch more preview stuff come down the line, but I want to hear from you all. If you've made it this far, hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Love to have you join the family. And so, with that, YouTube says watch one of these videos because I highly recommend it. Chop it up soon. Peace.